I had been hiking for 2 days when I found the perfect camping spot. A natural ring of tall pines, their trunks forming a loose circle around a patch of soft ground. It looked almost intentionally arranged, like nature had built a room just for me. I set up my tent, made dinner, and read until the fire died down. Everything seemed quiet and completely normal, peaceful. At around 11 p.m., I stepped out to take a piss and noticed something strange. The pine circle felt different. I couldn't explain it, but it looked tighter, like the trees had subtly leaned inward. I shook it off, blamed the angle of the moonlight, and went to bed. A few hours later, something woke me. Not a sound, more like a feeling. The kind where your body knows something's happening before your brain catches up. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside with my flashlight. The beam hit the pines, and I froze. They were closer. Not by a lot, but enough that I could tell. The circle that had been 15 or 20 feet wide was now maybe 10. I stood there in the cold, my breath clouding up in the light, trying to convince myself I was misremembering. Trees don't move. Obviously, I forced myself back into the tent and lay awake until sunrise. When I stepped outside in the morning, the pines were back where they'd been the night before. Exactly where they should be. Not an inch out of place. I almost laughed. Sleep deprivation does weird things. I spent the day hiking around the area, exploring old logging paths, finding animal tracks, taking photos. Nothing weird. Nothing threatening. But the moment dusk hit, something in the air stiffened again. Stillness. Not silence. Just a lack of movement. No wind. No sway in the branches. When full dark came, I checked the ring of pines again. They hadn't moved. Still looked normal. I felt stupid for being scared the night before. I climbed into the tent and drifted off. But sometime after midnight, a faint pressure built in the air, like the forest had inhaled and wasn't exhaling. A heaviness settled on my chest. I sat up, disoriented, and crawled out of the tent with my headlamp still dangling around my neck. I turned it on. The pines were now less than 3 feet from the tent. They formed a tight, perfect cage around me, trunks angled inward like ribs. Something hot and electric flooded my body. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own boots, staring up at the towering shapes leaning over me. Every tree around the circle bore deep, fresh gouges. Long, vertical scratches going high up the trunks. I swept my light higher and saw something I still refused to fully believe. All the scratches lined up perfectly, forming what looked like a doorway shape, tall and narrow, carved into the entire circle of trees. A doorway facing directly toward the tent. And in the dirt between the trunks, a clean, straight path had been cleared. Pine needles pushed aside in 2 long trails, like something had dragged itself forward on either side of the door. That was enough. I grabbed my pack, didn't care what I dropped, and bolted blindly into the woods with only the headlamp. I didn't stop running until the trailhead sign appeared like a miracle in the dark. I came back days later with 2 rangers. The pines were all upright. No scratch marks. No cleared path. No sign anything had ever been wrong. But I'll never forget the feeling of those trunks leaning over me, like a cage tightening, like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for me to fall asleep. I picked a high-altitude meadow for my campsite. Flat ground, a cold stream nearby, and a skyline of fir trees that looked almost painted. Nothing creepy about it. In daylight, it was beautiful, peaceful, empty. After dinner, the temperature dropped fast, and the stars came out brighter than anything I'd seen in years. I sat outside my tent, enjoying it until I noticed something odd on the far side of the meadow. A single, perfectly straight line in the tall grass, like something heavy had moved through it. Not walking, not dragging, just passing straight across. completely bending the grass in one ruler straight path. I walked over and knelt beside it. The blades were bent at the exact same angle, like someone pressed them down with a long metal plank. There were no footprints, no tire marks, no animal tracks, just a line. I told myself it was some weird wind pattern. I went to sleep. Around 1 a.m., I turned over in my sleeping bag and felt the faintest vibration in the ground, almost like a train far away. Steady, rhythmic, but incredibly deep, except there were no tracks anywhere near this part of the forest. I unzipped my tent and stepped out. The meadow was still. The sky was clear, but now there were 3 straight lines through the grass. Parallel, perfectly parallel, each one fresh. The blades still slowly lifting themselves after being forced down. A cold wave rolled through me. Nothing moves like that. Nothing that I knew of anyway. I decided to stay awake the rest of the night. I sat with my back against a tree, eyes scanning the meadow. Every so often, the ground would give that faint vibration again, just enough to feel through my boots. At some point, drowsiness caught up to me, and I blinked for what felt like half a second. When my eyes reopened, my stomach dropped. The lines had multiplied. A dozen of them now, crisscrossing the meadow in flawless geometry, intersecting at angles so sharp they looked drawn with tools, and they were closer to my tent. I stood up fast, my heart pounding. The moment I did, the ground trembled again. Louder this time, closer. Not like footsteps, not like engines, more like something dense moving without touching the ground. I swung my flashlight across the meadow, and then I saw the grass flattening in real time. Not falling over, not being crushed, just lowering, section by section, as if some enormous invisible weight were gliding through it. In another perfect line straight toward me, I staggered backward, tripped over my pack and scrambled inside the tent to grab whatever I could. The trembling grew stronger, turning the tent poles into faint rattling rods. I didn't even bother folding anything, just grabbed my bag and ran for the tree line. I didn't stop until sunrise. When I finally made it back to the meadow with 2 rangers later that day, everything was normal. The grass stood tall, untouched. No tracks, no bent blades, no sign anything had happened. Except for one thing. In the middle of the meadow, where the first straight line had been, lay my tent. Flattened. Perfectly. Every pole snapped in half. Fabric stretched smooth against the ground, as if something had pressed it down with the same impossible precision, and kept going in a straight, perfect line.